At the ultrasound, the doctor began to tremble. She pulled me aside and said, "You need to leave right now." I asked why, and she replied, "There's no time to explain. You'll understand everything when you see this." What she showed me made me boil with rage. But before we dive into this gripping story, please tell me which country you've joined us from. It's a great honor for me to know who's here with me on air right now. Enjoy the listening. That will come later. For now, Veronika Goncharova still believed in love and in the decency of men. She still bought her latte every morning at the same coffee shop on Bolshoi Prospect, drove a second-hand Skoda, though she could afford anything she wanted. The 180 million rubles left by her grandmother Klavdia Yerlieva 5 years earlier sat in a trust and quietly grew. The apartment on Petrogradskaya, 120 square meters with stucco moldings, parquet floors, and fireplaces, where 4 generations of Goncharov women had been born and had died, had been bequeathed to her. Veronika worked as marketing director at a small advertising agency, earned an honest salary, and on principle never mentioned her inheritance when meeting people. Money ruins people, she told her friend Alina over a glass of wine. Not the ones who have it, the ones who find out about it. Alina, thrice divorced and therefore cynical, shook her head. You just want to be loved for your pretty eyes. That doesn't happen. All men always sense something. Veronika didn't argue she had seen enough fortune hunters and understood her friend's point. Yet deep inside, a childish, stubborn hope still glowed. What if, 5 years before Veronika uttered those words in her grandmother's Moscow apartment, another story was unfolding? Polina Shakhmatova, 26, with money from her parents for an apartment and a comfortable life, and with absolute faith in human decency, was dating a charming financial consultant named Sviatoslav Rostov. For 8 months he was perfect. Took her to Suzdal for weekends, gave her books with touching inscriptions, remembered she couldn't stand cilantro, and adored thunderstorms. On the 9th month, he suggested opening a joint account for convenience, for the future, for our shared plans. "I don't want any secrets between us," he said, looking into her eyes, especially financial ones. Polina agreed. 3 weeks later, she discovered that 4 million rubles had vanished from the account, transferred to dubious investment platforms that Sviatoslav explained with complicated terms and asked her simply to trust him. "Are you spying on me?" He flared when she showed him the statement. "I'm trying to grow our money, and you're interrogating me." She didn't argue, quietly packed her things, closed the account, blocked his number, and didn't go to the police, too ashamed to admit that she, a clever girl from a good family, had been conned like the last fool. Sviatoslav drew 2 lessons from the experience. First, a rich woman would rather swallow humiliation than admit it publicly. Second, the scheme needed to be more complex, with multi-layered protection against exposure. It took him 2 years to find the next target. The annual charity evening that the Goncharov family had hosted in Shuvalovsky Palace since the 90s gathered St. Petersburg intelligentsia and the nouveau riche eager for cultural polish. Veronika stood by the bar, trying to escape yet another acquaintance, a heavy-set man in his 50s who in 3 minutes had managed to inquire about the square footage of her apartment and her prospects. "Excuse me, someone's waiting for me," she lied, turning to the bartender. "What will it be?" "Something strong and large." "Tough evening." A voice came from the side, low, with a hint of mockery. "The chamber orchestra is faltering," he continued, nodding toward the musicians. "Especially the violist. See how he winces on every note. He can't stand himself." Veronika laughed, genuinely, not out of politeness. "Sviatoslav," he introduced himself. "Financial consultant. A colleague dragged me here at the last moment. I have no idea who all these people are or why they're here, except for the champagne. And the champagne is here so the guests part with their money more willingly for charity," Veronika replied. "Logical. And you, what brings you here?" "Same. A colleague dragged me." She could have told the truth. That this was her family event, her grandmother's tradition, her apartment with a view of the Neva. But his ignorance felt so refreshing after the heavy-set man's questions about square meters. "Just a guest," she said. "I love music. Even when it falters. Especially when it falters. It proves the musicians are human, not robots." They talked until the end of the evening. He spoke of books, of travels, of how as a child he dreamed of being a conductor but lacked the talent. Not a word about money, not a question about work or housing. Veronica felt something thawing inside her, something she had frozen years ago after encounters with fortune hunters. She didn't know then that a financial consultant failing to Google the family hosting an evening in Shuvalovsky Palace was absurd, like a surgeon not glancing at scans before an operation. A year of courtship passed like a single day. Sviatoslav remembered she loved hydrangeas and couldn't stand orchids, that on Sundays she needed to lie in until noon, that she drank coffee with cinnamon and tea without sugar. How do you know all this? She laughed. I never told you. Just attentive, he replied. When you love someone, you notice everything. He insisted on paying for dinners though he earned less than she did, gave books instead of jewelry, spoke of the future but never of her inheritance, which he supposedly still knew nothing about. The first meeting with Nina Ivanovna, Veronica's mother, took place in the family kitchen over tea from her grandmother's service. Sviatoslav was charming and attentive, asked the right questions about her legal career, praised the baking. Veronica glowed. After he left, her mother drew her aside. Nika, I have to tell you something. Mom, what now? There's something off in his eyes. He's constantly calculating. I've spent 30 years looking at people like him in courtrooms. I know what they look like. Veronica set her cup down harder than intended. You saw him for 10 minutes and already have a diagnosis? 5 was enough. He looks at you like a problem to be solved. Maybe that's because you hate all men after Dad. Nina Ivanovna paled but continued calmly. I don't hate men. I hate when my daughter refuses to see the obvious. The obvious being that a decent man who loves me is suspicious because everyone must be after my money. Decent people don't pretend they don't know about the money. He works in finance, Nika. He knows exactly who you are. The argument lasted half an hour, with accusations, tears, and slammed doors. After that they barely spoke for 2 years, only formal holiday greetings. The wedding took place in the grandmother's apartment, the one with the view of the Neva. When Sviatoslav said his vows, tears streamed down his face. Veronica was certain they were tears of happiness. She didn't know they were tears of relief. The multi-year strategy was finally paying off. A marriage contract was signed, standard, separate property, but Sviatoslav already knew he wouldn't need it. He had something better. For 2 years they tried for a child. 2 years of failures, tests, ovulation charts, and fading hope. Finally, in the reproductive clinic, the doctor's dry voice delivered the diagnosis. Practically zero sperm count, natural conception impossible. After the appointment, Sviatoslav cried in the car for 20 minutes while Veronica stroked his head and whispered, "We'll manage together." That's what marriage is for. She didn't know that in those 20 minutes, he wasn't grieving his infertility. He was frantically devising how to use the situation to swap genetic material. "They'll find the clinic myself," he said a week later. "I want to do at least something useful." "You're so exhausted." Veronica agreed gratefully, emotionally and physically drained. Sviatoslav wasn't looking for the best clinic. He was looking for people who could be bought. On Vasilyevsky Island, he found a private reproductive clinic with the right profile. Mid-range prices, good reputation, and a nurse, Lada Stepanovna Korneva, burdened with a 20,000 ruble monthly mortgage, consumer loans, and the look of someone who had long given up on her own life. 2.5 million. Sviatoslav told her at a CAF where no one would recognize them, for a simple service. What kind? I need to hide one genetic detail from my wife. Nothing criminal, just a family secret she shouldn't know. Lada was silent a long time, twisting a cheap lighter in her fingers. 2 years of my salary, she finally said. What exactly? For silence and a little help with documentation. She agreed, convincing herself it wasn't a crime, just a private family matter she had been let in on for money. The embryologist who later learned of the scheme received 1.5 million for the same service. Keep quiet and ask no questions. Sviatoslav built the chain of participants methodically. Each received just enough to stay silent, but not enough to feel like a full criminal. All sincerely believed they were helping a man with noble motives hide a hereditary illness from a loving but overly sensitive wife. The first IVF cycle failed. The embryos didn't implant, and Veronica cried for 3 days straight, locked in the grandmother's bedroom, while Sviatoslav stroked her hair and said the right words. It would work next time, Medicine works wonders. He wasn't going anywhere. He knew it would work. By then the mechanism was already in motion. Lada Korneva agreed to another meeting in an unremarkable CAF far from the clinic, colleagues, and the growing number of city center cameras. Sviatoslav arrived with a folder and the expression of a man cornered by life, though in reality, he felt like a hunter finally sighting prey. "You understand," he said, stirring cold tea with a plastic stick. "There's a hereditary illness in my family, Huntington's. My mother died of it at 53, my grandmother too. I can't tell my wife. She's already on edge after the failed cycle. But if the child is born with my genes, and what do you suggest?" Lada watched him warily but didn't leave. That was a good sign. "Donor material instead of mine. My wife will never know. The child will be healthy. Everyone happy. That's a criminal offense. It's saving my family." He slid an envelope across the table without opening it, just nudging it so the edge touched her half-drunk cappuccino cup. $2.5 million for silence and a little help with documentation. Her hand hovered over the envelope for a full minute while Sviatoslav waited patiently. He knew she had already decided, just hadn't admitted it to herself yet. He watched her calculate. Mortgage in cappuccino, car loan for the vehicle she bought to drive her mother to treatments, debt for that mother's private clinic care. $2.5 million was more than 2 years of her salary at the clinic where she changed specimen containers and listened to patients complain about life's unfairness. "I need to think," she said at last, her voice breaking on the final word. "Of course. Just not too long. The second cycle is in 3 weeks." She called 2 days later and said yes, in the voice of someone who already hated herself for what she was about to do, but not enough to refuse. The embryologist was even easier, $300,000 to ask no questions and adjust records if needed. He even reassured Lada when they met in the clinic corridor. Husbands know best what arrangements spouses make it's their private business. They were simply helping a family keep a donor secret. Sviatoslav found the donor through a closed forum where graduate students earned extra money participating in medical research. Vladislav Novikov, 26, applied mathematics department at the Polytechnic University, hostel debts, evening tutoring for food money, and no prospects until he defended his dissertation. $1,200,000. Sviatoslav offered in a park near the Peter and Paul Fortress. Standard donor payment is $35,000. Vladislav frowned. Confidentiality. Private arrangement between spouses. No questions, no future contact, no claims on the child, though anonymous donors have no rights anyway. Vladislav could have thought twice, could have refused, could have at least asked why such secrecy and where an ordinary financial consultant got $4 million for bribes. But $1,200,000 to someone who ate instant noodles and considered a coffee shop a luxury was not money. It was a ticket to another life. When he asked, Sviatoslav didn't mention that the money for the entire operation, over $4 million, had been stolen from his own clients at the investment firm in small amounts over 1.5 years, carefully masked in the books, hoping an audit wouldn't come before he gained access to his wife's inheritance. The second cycle succeeded. Veronica saw 2 lines on the test bought at the pharmacy downstairs and cried with happiness right there in the bathroom, sitting on the edge of the cast-iron tub, while Sviatoslav hugged her and thought that in 9 months, no, 10, after birth and recovery, he would finally get what he had worked 4 years for. The plan was simple and flawless. Wait for the birth, alter the clinic records so the second cycle looked failed, then suggest a DNA test, sentimental, for the family album, for the story they would tell the child when grown. When the test showed he wasn't the father, accuse the wife of infidelity. Either she quietly gave him $60 million and the apartment, or he staged a public scandal, courts, interviews, citywide shame. A woman from the Goncharov family who cheated on her husband and bore another man's child. The tabloids would love it. And if it reached court, her indecent behavior would let him claim a larger share of joint property. Sviatoslav knew she would pay anything to end it quietly. He pictured the moment, her face when she realized she was cornered, no way out, all evidence against her. Test results, medical records showing natural conception, no witnesses or documents in her defense. She would be humiliated, crushed, disgraced as a cheating wife who bore a stranger's child, and she would pay everything just to make it stop, to keep her name from being dragged through every corner of the city. He counted on only one thing: that the bribed nurse had an older sister working in a prenatal clinic. In the 4th month of pregnancy, Veronica began noticing oddities she had previously dismissed as paranoia or hormonal swings. Sviatoslav's phone now always lay face down, on the table, nightstand, sofa arm, kitchen counter beside half-drunk coffee. He changed the passcode silently, without telling her the new one or explaining why. He took calls on the balcony even in November when the temperature dropped below zero and the wind cut to the bone. "Who is it?" she asked once when he returned from the balcony with red ears and fingers he rubbed together. "A client from Moscow. Portfolio restructuring. Urgent. On a Saturday night? Money doesn't sleep, Nika." She wanted to believe. God, how she wanted to believe. In these simple explanations, in normal life with a normal husband and normal work troubles. But then she found in the pocket of his jacket, which she was taking to the dry cleaner, a restaurant receipt for dinner for two costing $25,000 and a hotel receipt from Pushkin dated the day he was supposedly at a corporate training. "What is this?" She placed the papers on the kitchen table beside the vase of dried flowers her grandmother collected every summer. Sviatoslav didn't even blink. That was what alarmed her most. Too calm a reaction to an accusation that should at least have surprised him. "Client dinner. The Moscow guy I told you about. The hotel. Training ran late. Decided not to drive at night on icy roads." Training at a hotel? He sighed with such patient condescension, such weariness at having to explain the obvious to a foolish child, that she felt guilty for asking. "You know hormones affect perception. My mother warned me pregnant women sometimes become irrational." She apologized. He hugged her, kissed the crown of her head, and she felt his lips slide over her hair without warmth. Just a practiced, automatic gesture that had lost meaning. Requests for money began soon after and grew more insistent each week. First, he suggested making him a trusted account signatory in case something happens during birth, complications occur. Then he spoke of a notary power of attorney. Common sense. All normal couples do it. It's not about trust. It's practicality. One evening over dinner, as Veronica ate vegetable soup she had cooked herself because Sviatoslav had long stopped offering help, he said, "The apartment is too big for us. 120 square meters for two, even with a child. Why not sell and invest wisely? I know management companies that give a steady 20% a year." "It's my grandmother's apartment," Veronica said, setting down her spoon. "Grandmother has been gone 5 years. It's just real estate, an asset that should work." She refused gently, carefully, trying not to provoke conflict, and saw something shift in his face. The mask slipped for a second, revealing something cold, calculating, alien. He didn't argue, just nodded and left the kitchen. For the next 3 days he barely spoke, answering only when necessary and looking straight through her. She didn't know then that his gambling debts had reached 15 million. Online poker, sports betting, trips to Sochi casinos disguised as corporate retreats. The people he owed didn't send polite reminders or sue. They resolved issues differently, and pressure was mounting daily. A week later, Katia, her best friend since university, the only person unafraid to say unpleasant truths without softening the edges, came for lunch. "You hear yourself?" Katia pushed away a plate of half-eaten salad that now tasted like nothing. "You just spent 5 minutes explaining why your husband has the right not to answer simple questions about restaurants and hotels. He's tired from work, having a hard time. When was the last time you spoke normally with your mother? Not 2-line holiday texts." Veronica fell silent. Almost 2 years of formal messages, nothing more. No calls, no visits, not even arguments, because arguments require contact. And another question. Katia looked her straight in the eyes with a gaze both hard and compassionate. "When was the last time Sviatoslav was genuinely happy to see you? Not for show in front of guests, not for photos, not because it's expected, but simply glad you came, that you're near, that you exist." Veronica opened her mouth to answer and couldn't remember. That night, she woke at 2 a.m. to an empty space beside her, the sheet already cool. She found her husband in the kitchen, standing by the window, speaking in a hushed voice. His silhouette against the night city looked alien. "Almost time," she caught. "By spring, everything will be settled. Just had to wait." He turned, saw her in the doorway, barefoot in her nightgown, belly just beginning to round, and instantly ended the call. Work, he said. Sorry I woke you. She nodded and returned to bed. Inside, something shifted. The mechanism of distrust she had kept on safety for 2 years finally clicked off. By spring, she would give birth in spring, and then everything would be settled. But for whom? At the scheduled ultrasound in the 4th month, Sviatoslav couldn't come, an urgent client meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. He was very sorry next time for sure. Veronica was already used to such unreschedulable meetings and went alone, as she now did almost everything in recent months. In the clinic, her regular doctor was on vacation. Another doctor, Oksana Stepanovna Korneva, a short woman in her 40s with attentive gray eyes and precise movements, conducted the scan. Lie down, she said, preparing the machine. Let's see how your baby is doing. The exam began routinely. Cold gel on the belly, pressure of the probe, the familiar sound of the heartbeat, fast, rhythmic, like hoofbeats. Oksana Stepanovna typed into the electronic chart, checking data, reviewing history. Then her fingers froze over the keyboard, and Veronica saw her face change. Professional neutrality gave way to something else, something like horror. Get dressed, please. Her voice changed, tense yet gentle, like someone about to deliver bad news. And come to my office. What happened? Is something wrong with the baby? The baby is fine. Come to my office. In the office, Oksana Stepanovna locked the door and turned the latch. Veronica sat in the visitor chair, panic rising. In 3 seconds, her mind raced through every possible pathology, every horror story she had pushed away for 4 months, every late-night internet thread. You need to leave your husband, the doctor said, today, and hire a divorce lawyer before you go home. Veronica gave a nervous laugh at the absurdity, at the relief that it wasn't about the child. Excuse me? I know how this sounds, but I have information you must see. Oksana Stepanovna took an ordinary cardboard folder from her desk drawer and placed it in front of Veronica. My younger sister works as a nurse in the clinic on Vasilyevsky. 3 weeks ago, she came to me around midnight. She hadn't slept properly for months, had lost weight, couldn't meet my eyes. Guilt was eating her alive. She told me everything, about the bribery, the sample swap. Here are the documents. Your husband paid clinic staff to replace his genetic material with a donor's. Veronica stared at the folder as if it were a live grenade. That's impossible, she said. Why would he do that? So he could later accuse you of infidelity and blackmail you. The clinic records will be altered so the second cycle looks failed, conception natural. A paternity test will prove he isn't the father. Then either you pay and give up the apartment, or he creates a public scandal across the city. I saw in your chart that you're married, and my sister told me the rest. Veronica opened the folder. Inside were printouts of correspondence between Sviatoslav and the embryologist, vague phrasing but clear meaning. Sample replaced, documentation ready, second payment after birth. Bank transfers. 2.5 million to Lada Korneva, 300,000 to the embryologist, 1,200,000 to Vladislav Novikov, 26, graduate student at the Polytechnic University, the donor. Medical forms with seals, sample identification numbers. She read and the words didn't register. Letters formed sentences, but meaning slipped away, because meaning would mean that absolutely everything in her life for the past 4 years had been a lie. The tears at the wedding, not from happiness, from relief the scam was working. The sobbing in the car after the diagnosis, not grief, fear the plan might fail. The charity evening in Shivalovsky, not chance, not fate, not romance, carefully planned hunting. I have no idea who the Goncharovs are. A lie from the very first second, the very first glance, the very first smile. And her mother who saw through him in 5 minutes, who said he was calculating, whom Veronica hadn't listened to for 2 years, calling her paranoid, jealous, unable to accept her daughter's maturity. She closed the folder and looked up at Oksana Stepanovna. There were no tears, no despair, no desire to curl up in a corner and wait for rescue. Something else, hard and focused. For 4 years he had built a trap, certain she would break at the first blow, that shame and humiliation would force her to pay and stay silent. He saw her as easy prey, modest, trusting, desperate to be loved. He had no idea whom he had married. On the way home, Veronica remembered the surveillance cameras Sviatoslav had installed in the apartment 2 years ago, explaining it as concern for security, You never know what might happen while we're out. Now she understood the real purpose. Control, surveillance, the ability to watch her every move, even remotely. She stopped in front of a shop window, pretended to examine maternity dresses, and for several minutes rehearsed her expression, calm, happy, unsuspecting. At home, she hugged her husband, showed him the ultrasound picture, and said the doctor had praised her excellent progress. How did it go? Sviatoslav asked without looking up from his phone. Fine. The baby is growing, heartbeat strong. The doctor said I'm a model patient. Great. He finally looked up and gave the smile she once thought warm. I knew everything would be all right. Over dinner, she asked about his day, laughed at his jokes about baby names, apologized for her recent paranoia, blamed hormones, using his own excuse against him. Sviatoslav relaxed, leaned back in his chair, poured himself wine with the air of a man fully in control. That night, he slept soundly. She lay awake until 3 a.m., staring into darkness and planning his destruction. The following week, Veronica took sick leave and drove to Viborg, far enough from St. Petersburg to avoid chance encounters, constantly checking her rearview mirror for tails. She found a private detective through an old acquaintance who once worked in the prosecutor's office, Regina Valeryevna Dragunova, ex-MVD investigator with 15 years' experience and a reputation for having seen everything and being surprised by nothing. They met in a roadside CAF on the outskirts of Viborg. Regina was a large woman in her 50s with short hair and a gaze that made you want to confess every sin. Tell me everything, she said, wasting no time on pleasantries. Veronica told her, from the charity evening to the folder of documents. Regina listened silently, making notes in a battered notebook. When the story ended, her lips curved into an unkind smile. Overconfident men always make many mistakes, she said. They think they're smarter than everyone. That's why they leave traces. Give me 2 weeks. She managed it in 10 and called Veronica for another meeting in the same CAF. Your husband is a talented bastard, Regina stated, placing a finger-thick folder on the table. Gambling debts, 15 million. Online poker, sports betting, Sochi casinos disguised as corporate trips. The people he owes don't sue. They resolve things differently. Where did he get money for bribes? From clients' pockets. Embezzlement of about $4.5 million at the investment firm where he works. Masked for a year and a half, but traces remain. Documents, bank statements, photos, call logs. And something else, Regina added with the same smile. Your husband has had an 8-month affair with his assistant. Dinners, hotel rooms, weekend trips, all documented. I found his previous victim, Paulina Shakhmatova from Moscow, 5 years ago. She's ready to testify. The meeting with Lada Korneva took place in Kronstadt, in a small CAF near the cathedral where no one would recognize them. Lada looked exhausted, gaunt, with the face of someone who hadn't slept properly in months. I knew it was wrong, she said through tears, crumpling a paper napkin. But I needed the money for the mortgage, and he was so convincing, talked so beautifully about a genetic illness, protecting the family. Are you prepared to give official testimony? Veronica asked. Yes. I should have gone to the police the next day. I was afraid of losing my license, my job, everything. But now I'll say anything, under oath. Veronica looked at this woman, accomplice to a crime, paid $2.5 million to help destroy another person's life, and saw not a villain but another victim. Sviatoslav had manipulated her exactly as he had manipulated Veronica, found a weakness and used it. The villain in this story isn't you, Veronica said. The call to her mother was the hardest step of all. 2 years of near silence, 2 years of choosing Sviatoslav, defending him, calling her mother jealous and paranoid. The phone rang twice, each tone felt eternal. Hello. Nina Ivanovna's voice held caution and hope at once. Mom. Veronica felt her throat tighten. You were right about everything concerning him. And I'm so very sorry. A pause lasted several seconds. Veronica braced for the deserved "I told you so," the list of ignored warnings. What do you need, darling? Her mother asked. Those 4 words broke Veronica more than everything else. 30 years of legal experience, intuition her daughter had rejected for a con man, and this woman's first instinct was not gloating but protection. Within 48 hours, Nina Ivanovna connected her daughter with Anfisa Dmitrievna Malasheva, St. Petersburg's top family lawyer, a short woman with gray hair who looked like someone's kind grandmother but worked with surgical precision. Your husband faces charges on several articles, Anfisa Dmitrievna stated after reviewing the materials. Large-scale fraud, misappropriation of entrusted funds, falsification of medical documentation, 5 to 10 years in total. Now the blackmailer is the one under threat. He was the one cheating for 8 months. If anything affects property division, it will be his behavior, not yours. The trap is ready. We just need to choose the moment. Veronica suggested celebrating before the birth in the family apartment on Petrogradskia. Both families, close friends, 50 guests. Sviatoslav loved the idea. More witnesses to his role as devoted husband. The day of the party was sunny. The apartment overlooking the Neva gleamed, covered tables, flowers on windowsills, champagne in silver buckets. Sviatoslav's parents arrived from Moscow, proud of their successful son. He worked the room like a politician on the campaign trail. Handshakes, compliments, charming laughter, hand constantly on his wife's belly for photos. Around 3 o'clock, he did what Veronica had been waiting for. Loudly, publicly, suggested a DNA test after the birth, as proof of his bond with the baby, for the family album. The crowd cooed. What a caring father. Veronica stood, took a glass of mineral water, and asked for attention. I want to thank everyone who came, she began calmly, and to tell you the truth about the man I married. For the next 15 minutes, she methodically destroyed Sviatoslav's image. Bribery of the clinic, sperm swap, planned to accuse his wife of infidelity and blackmail her. Either she gave money in the apartment or public scandal across the city. Embezzlement of $4.5 million from clients. Gambling debts of $15 million. 8-month affair with his assistant. Previous victim in Moscow. Lada Korneva stepped forward and confirmed her role. Vladislav Novikov testified about payment. From the next room, police appeared. She's lost her mind. Sviatoslav shouted. It's the hormones. She doesn't know what she's saying. Is any of it true? His mother asked in a trembling voice. He opened his mouth and found no words. As he was let out in handcuffs, he made one last attempt. Nika, wait. We can settle everything. I made mistakes, but I love you. I always loved you. Think of the child, of the family. Veronica looked at the man she had defended against her own mother, with whom she had shared life for 3 years, who had vowed to love and protect her while calculating how much he could steal. You're absolutely right, Sviatoslav, she said. We just settled everything. Sviatoslav Pavlovich Rostov received 7 years in a general regime colony. His mistress quit the next morning and vanished. His parents stopped attending court after the first week. The Sochi creditors, who had waited patiently while he had a rich wife, immediately demanded repayment through lawyers, targeting his parents. 5 months after the party, Veronica gave birth to a healthy boy. Some asked if she planned to contact Vladislav Novikov, the biological father. Veronica considered it and decided no. Her son would have her grandmother Nina Ivanovna, the entire Goncharov legacy, 4 generations of women who had lived in this apartment overlooking the Neva. Family is not DNA, not blood tests, not genetic coincidence. Family is the people who show up, stay, and choose you every day. 3 weeks later, early in the morning, Veronica sat in the kitchen of the Petrogradskia apartment. Sunlight poured through the windows onto the Neva, which gleamed just as it had for grandmother Klavdia Yermolaeva when she was a young wife. Her phone buzzed on the table, a message from Mom. Lunch tomorrow? Veronica smiled and typed. Always. When she once asked her mother why she never said, I told you so, Nina Ivanovna replied. Because watching you destroy that man was more satisfying than reminding you of mistakes. Sviatoslav thought he had married easy prey, modest, trusting, desperate to be loved. He married a Goncharov. Now he has 7 years in a colony to reflect on that mistake.